Hi guys, welcome to the DadBub Show. I'm one of your hosts, Ken Blowfield, and Brendo and I, we interview dads all over the world to find out their secrets on balancing how to be a high-performing dad and a high performer in life too. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DadBub Show. I'm your host, Ken Blowfield, and typically Brendo and I interview guests from around the world, understanding their secrets on how to become a high performer in life and a high-performing dad too. It's something that Brendo and I take seriously, very seriously. We try to be entrepreneurs and business owners and high performers in life, but we also want to become a high-performing dad too, and we know there are continuous lessons to learn, so that's why we're getting guests from around the world so we can learn the secrets on how to be the best fathers for our children in the years to come. Now, without further ado, inside this episode, we're not interviewing a guest per se. We're actually doing a recap episode. You're going to hear in some of the things that you haven't heard on any of the episodes before, some of the behind-the-scenes footage, some of the bits of the content that you may have missed on previous episodes. So strap yourselves in, listen carefully, and we'll see you on the inside. Peace out. You were pretty much at rock bottom, right? You're leaving the country, you're selling everything, you're claiming bankruptcy, so you're at rock bottom. You can only go up from there. But I have to ask, right, because over the time of this period of your life, from Untitled is only 14 now, and it's only 14 years ago that you were at this rock bottom. And over this period of time, you've not only gone from the Swan lifestyle to now the unstoppable family. There's unstoppable mama, there's unstoppable surfer, there's unstoppable beard, there's the unstoppable family, there's unstoppable kid. There's this whole unstoppable, it's almost hashtag unstoppable for you guys. So how were you able to grow a business, and not just one business, but a series of other businesses, and support, beautiful Hannah Lay achieve her dreams in such a short period of time, 14 years?
Well, it was easy, I would say. Like, once we got rid of everything, there was this switch. Before, when we were making really, we were one of the top income earners in this personal development affiliate marketing company. And that was, to me, was just easy. All you had to do was market and freaking call and put people into a system. That was easy to me. And once we let everything go, there was a switch to where when we were making a lot and then we found out we're losing, we couldn't make any money. And then when we let everything go and say, just have it, then everything started flowing again. But then afterwards, what we were realizing that, man, this, affiliate marketing, I don't know, it's like we had to build something of our own. And we started at first, we were really good at brands. So we're like, hey, let's start, Unstoppable Branding Agency. And we started this freedompreneur movement to be able to show other people how to be able to work from anywhere in the world. Just wanted to show that. And what we realized, when you had your own company, man, it was like 100 times harder than doing an affiliate marketing. So it's just been a learning process, man. And it's getting kicked in the gut hundreds and hundreds of times and figuring out, it's like when you're your own boss, if I could think back at the corporate world, it was a piece of cake because you could blame everyone else, your boss, and you could just, do just the minimum amount of work. But man, when you take it on, it takes, like, if you were to know what it was going to take, and you guys being entrepreneurs, and you're the show, and people's lives, you're responsible for people's lives, man. There's only one. You just got to keep on getting up and going every single day.
So you guys traveled the world, but you're located in Bali at the moment. So when you guys sold up and you moved, what was the process of moving like, more so from like a family perspective, and you've got a young child at the time and getting her integrated in. So from the parent role, how did you go about that process? Or was she just like naturally along the ride with you guys? And it seems like, a lot of things have been a smooth process.
No, there's nothing smooth about it, man. It seems that way. When we left, she was 1 year old, so it wasn't until she was 2.5 years old when we came to Bali. Actually, we came here. We went to Hawaii. We went to Mexico. Traveled through a little bit of Central America, and then we came to Bali in 2009. And she went to her first school. and that was like kind of like a just a fun type of place, right? And then we started going to places where like, hey, do you want to go to school, or and she's like, I want to meet friends, 'cause she was an only child. So our whole thing, this was probably the one of the biggest learning things, is being flexible. And you're never gonna, like, what you think is like the right thing to do, you got to go with your gut, your intuition, and if things not going the right way, you just switch gears. And so she wanted to keep on going to school. So we lived in Peru. She would go to school, Brazil. She went to, like probably 6 different languages, before she was 7 years old. And then when we got to Bali, she was, I think, 8 years old, 9 years old. And, she went to school for a couple of years, dropped out, started her first company, made 6 figures at the age of 11. And there you go.
And so obviously you mentioned you had to grow up quick, and so, with the success that you had, finances no longer become an issue. But with the work you're putting in, with the sales and commission only, and no doubt you're putting in big weeks, how did you balance being a new dad and, very quickly a multiple-time dad with working at a very high level? So how did you balance, being a dad
I
as
still
well
think
as being a high
I don't think
performer?
that's something I've actually mastered. But if I look back at it, especially when my 4 kids were younger, it's really about having certain times after work where you're just unplugged.
Yeah.
Right? Where now that's hard to do. Now, as a salesperson, as an employee, it's a little bit easier than maybe like if you own your own business, especially when you're in startup mode. And let's say that your business partner like Matt lives in Australia and is on a completely different time zone and needs to get a hold of you at 8 at night, but you still have to set like boundaries, right? So what I do is I try to, we have our office space here for our USA headquarters here in Scottsdale. It's only about 10 minutes away from my house. It's not very far. But what I try to do is I try to get out of here every day by 4:30 at the very most, a couple minutes to get home. And I try to just like put my phone down for like 2 hours straight, not look at it, and just focus in on my 3.5-year-old. Okay, now I'm not saying I do that perfectly every time, because maybe there's an issue, maybe there's, an employee, something's going on, we got to help them. There's always something going on, but I try to literally, like, let's say from 5 to 7, usually about 5 to 7 or so, not even look at my phone. Now, I don't do that all the time, but I try to do that most of the time, okay? Then, I'm playing with Sophie, that's my 3.5-year-old. And then what we do at that point, she starts getting ready for bed around 7:30, 7:45, taking a bath. So I always, every night that I'm home, I go help my spouse, give her a bath, get her ready. It's like our family time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And put her down to bed. We read a couple stories. Then Daddy puts her in her bed, and then I tell her 2 more stories. Like, we're telling stories all the time. So we read 2 stories in books, and then she wants me to tell her like 2 stories. And they're like 2 or 3 minute just stories about Smurfs or princesses or unicorns or something. And that's kind of the family time. So I'm out of her room usually by 8:30 at night. Okay.
Yep.
And then after 8:30, then I can, be with my spouse, or if I've got other things that I want to do, my spouse is a little bit more lenient and let me do that because we've had kind of more family time. On the weekends, I try to totally unplug as much as I can. And on Saturday and Sunday mornings, I get her up, I, make my daughter breakfast, just me and her, probably spend the first hour from like 7:30, 8:30 just by ourselves. And we just do stuff. Like, I'll feed her breakfast, we just kind of hang out. We watch, Bluey from Australia.
Yo, Bluey.
Right?
That's an Aussie dog. Aussie dog.
Aussie dog. So that's on Disney Junior over here. And we just kind of spend that time together. And then my wife comes down and we do some stuff. So especially on the weekends, I try really not to do anything. If I have to do some work on the weekends, I just get up really early. So I'll get up at like 5 and I'll have like a couple of hours before they get up where I just try to get all that stuff done. Or, she'll take a nap from like 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And then during that time, I'm doing stuff, but the other time when she's up, I'm focused on her. And guys, I'm not perfect, but that's what I do.
Jeremy, do you mind if I ask, right? Because this is now, your 3.5-year-old now, and your position now is very, very different to what it was 20 years ago.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is like you have Matt as a CEO, you have James helping you out, you have a whole team behind you. I think you've got, is it 80 employees now, or you've got even more than that? Am I wrong?
With all of our salespeople and everything, like for our done for you stuff, it's over 100 now.
Yeah, amazing, right? So you've got 100 people that you can rely on, you can utilize. Of course, 100 people doesn't mean that your life gets easier. Sometimes it gets harder dealing with people. But saying that, it's like it's not just you anymore. It's you can sit back and the team is making money for the company, but also for you. But back 20 years ago, the only money you earned was the hours that you put in to make the sale. Right. I know when in sales, sometimes it's like, I will take a 9 p.m. meeting. I will take a 4 a.m. meeting. I will take this. I will skip on a date night with my wife because I just want to make this commission so I can make this sale. Because in my mind, more money makes my wife happier, but in the long run, it can very much quickly ruin a relationship.
I mean, it really just depends. Like when I was a salesperson, I had it so dialed in because of my skill level that prospects were really chasing me. Like they were working around my schedule. I wasn't really working around their schedule. Does that make sense? Like I see so many salespeople that we start training, especially realtors, and they're like showing homes Monday at 9, Sunday at 7 p.m. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're letting people just roll you around. Yeah. You take control of that conversation where they view you as the expert and the trusted authority. And I'm telling you, they will work around your schedule. So once I had figured that out and learned those type of sales skills, because let's say if I make a call, like an outbound lead, and like, oh, now's not a good time, can you call me back on the weekend? Well, a lot of salespeople are like, yeah, sure, what time can I call you? I'm like, yeah, I apologize. I wouldn't be available on the weekends for sure. What I can do though, if you have your calendar handy, I can pull up mine and have you book a specific time with me and vice versa during like business hours. That way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. Would that help you? Mm-hmm. And that changes the whole dynamic of that conversation. Because then they're like, whoa, well, huh? Like that way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. So what I can do, if you have your calendar handy, I can pull up mine and have you book a specific time with me during like normal business hours. That way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. Would that help you? Now, what instantly goes off in that person's mind?
Well, it's like I don't want to. It's almost like a doctor frame, really. It's like, oh, well, okay, yes, yeah. I suppose I will book a time that works with you. This guy's
an expert. He's not just like some salesperson I can just do whatever I want with him with. Right? I mean, you don't want to live that type of life. No. So it immediately, it's called like a status frame, okay? So that status frame, I become a higher status in that frame than them at that point. So when I'm a higher status, they look at me as more of an expert. Does that make sense? So now they start to work around my schedule because normal business hours make sense. Like I'm a person. I'm helping you solve problems. Like why would I work for you at 9 o'clock at night? Do you want to work for me at 9 o'clock at night? Right? Yeah. So I'm working during normal business hours. So you immediately raise your status with that status frame and they start to respect you more. Okay? No more calling on the weekends. No more working at 7, 8, 9, 10 p.m. at night. You don't have to do all that. I didn't do any of that. And, at the height of my career, I was making almost $3 million a year in straight commissions. And I wasn't working past 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I damn sure wasn't working on the weekends.
Number one, financially, I don't want to give an ounce of dollars to my kids ever. Like there's just no, and my parents same way. Like my dad has a ton of money. I might get money when he dies. Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. There's no expectation of me getting any dollars when he dies. And I love that. I think it's a great way. And actually we can talk about like family legacy money. There's some cool things you can build, like a family bank or family, like different, like good ways to build family offices and bad ways to build family offices. And we can talk about that in a minute. As far as emotional and other things, I like intentional parenting. There's this new trend of like, just whatever the kid wants, whenever they're hungry, they can eat, whenever they want to sleep, they can just sleep. And I like more structure. And I think, obviously they obviously have choice. It's not like we're forcing them to do anything, but I think kids like structure, especially when they're kids, because they don't, they're just brand new to this world. And so, we have, structured, like as far as naps or eating and stuff as right now, but as he gets a little bit older, when it's a little more impressionable, my dad was so good at teaching me stuff all the time. And my dad, still this day, he is so good. Every time I'm with him, And like growing up, I learned about mortgages when I was 11 years old. I learned how to short the stock market when I was like 8 years old. Like he'd get on the whiteboard and just teach me like life, like what's a credit score? He taught me that stuff, like how to change tire. Like my dad was so good at being an intentional father to teach me real life skills. I knew what our mortgage payment was in the house, what insurance was, what, like what appreciation was, like just talk housing market. Like he taught me all that stuff and gave me actual numbers. I think parents sometimes are a little they just don't share the numbers. So I got to college and I'm like talking to my roommates about finance and stock market, and they had no clue. They didn't even know how to set up a bank account, you know what I mean? Or how to set up an LLC what is an LLC? What's a company? How do you set up a corporation? No one had ever taught him this stuff. And so my dad was really intentional to me. So I want to be intentional to my son about teaching him, especially finance. I think finance is like the biggest, just no one learns finance, at least in the United States. I don't know about you guys. No one learns about money,
probably less.
How money works.
Probably less in Australia.
It's ridiculous, right? So I like being intentional with stuff like that. And those are, I don't know, life skills for sure. And then spiritual stuff as well. Me and my wife we're pretty open about spiritual things and things that we're learning and feeling and stuff that connection to God and our kid's got to learn his own journey, right? He's on his own path, but we want to be there as good mentors and friends for him, and someone that he can rely on and talk to. And I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay? Please do.
This is something that changed my life. This changed my life. I think this is good for dads. This absolutely changed my life. So I was 11, going on 12 years old. Okay, I was going into middle school, and anyways, that's a lot of, puberty, the whole thing, timing, right? So my dad sits me down for the birds and bees conversation, all right? So he sits me down, and it's Sunday night, and we start chatting. He goes, Bridger, he goes, if you go out to high school or whatever, and you get your girlfriend pregnant, and you have, whatever, and you come tell me about it, he goes, I won't be mad. And I'm like, huh? Like, what do you mean you won't be mad? And he's like, no, I'll be good. I promise. I won't be mad. Your mom, she'll freak out. She'll be furious, but I'll be fine. And I was like, okay. And he goes, however, you're the one that has to deal with that, kind of problem going forward. We'll try to help you out, whatever, but just understand that's your problem. If you go out and get on drugs and meth and become an alcoholic or on cocaine and you come tell me about it, he goes, I'm not going to be mad. I'll be a little sad for you. And yes, we'll take you to rehab. We're going to help you out through this whole thing. But just understand, though, you're the one that has to go through that. It was on the contrary, if you go to school and you get good grades and you get a 4.0 or straight A's and you go to a great university, become a doctor, a lawyer, a great business person, you make tons of money, you build a house on a hill with a fun car and you got everything, right? He goes, that's your life. That's the life you get. That's not my life. I don't get any benefit from that. That's your life. He goes, I got my house, my cars. This is my life. And he goes, don't ever do anything in life based on what your dad or mom will think of you. Do something in life because you want to do it. Don't go to school because we want you to go to school. Go to school because you want to go to school, or don't go to school. And he goes, if you want to be put on a tutu and be a unicorn and, go do ballet, cool. He's like, we don't care. Just do it for you though. Don't do it for us. And I left that meeting. I was like, huh. And it really changed my perspective. I honestly started going to school for me. And I remember I like a couple months later, I got straight A's on a report card. I went and showed my dad. I'm like, Dad, check it out. Like I got straight A's. Like, look at how cool. And he's like, cool. And I was like, huh. I was like, oh yeah, those aren't his grades. Those are my grades.
I don't need any external validation. I can do. This is for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, huh, that's cool. And that was, my parents lived that to a T. Every choice was my choice. I didn't have a curfew in high school. They just said, my dad, I remember he told me, he's like, hey, we want you home by midnight, but if you don't come home, just understand your mom will be probably up worried about you. So make sure to call or at least text us or let us know. And funny enough, I was home at about midnight almost every night, right? Because I felt that responsibility. Anyways, college, career, business, like it was, and they did a really good job of that. I think putting your kids in the driver's seat and letting them make decisions and choices and treating them older than they are, I think is so good. I hate when people baby their kids. I'm all about treat them a little bit older than and they'll usually rise to the occasion.
Yeah, wow. It's really, really interesting stuff. And, the relationship that you had with your dad during that time, because you did speak about, your friends didn't really know about that. I know our culture and the way that I grew up, it was very almost rude to speak about money. So I never learned about it growing up either. Did you realize growing up that the way that you were taught by your dad was different?
No, not really, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit. I was like, I kind of learned some cool stuff until I got to college. When I got to college and I had roommates, I realized how little everyone knew about finances and just regular, how the world worked as far as money and how bank accounts and deposits. Like the fact that whenever you deposit $1 into a bank account, the bank can go lend that money 15 times out. A lot of people don't know that, right? Like I learned that when I was 14. Right? If you put $1 million into a bank, the bank can literally go make $15 million of loans. That's how that's modern reserve currency system. It's just interesting how the SWIFT system works. Anyways, no, I didn't realize that until college, to be honest. And now we have a company that educates people on finances and funds specifically, just because there's this huge gap. And I'll just say this: if the number one cause of divorce, stress, suicide is finances, is financial reasons. If you could do one thing to maybe save your marriage, finances, it won't solve all your problems, but it helps, right? Yeah. It helps quite a bit. So when I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure I don't have, there's one problem in life I'm not going to have. It's called money. I'm never going to struggle with money. If I can learn the money game right now, I'm not going to struggle for the rest of my life. So
how do you use what you learned from the military from a perspective of order, right? There's people of hierarchy with your own children today. And even as you were raising your children in the military, right? Again, there was a position of power, there was the hierarchy, and then, there was a pecking order essentially. Yeah. And obviously in a family dynamic, it's mum and dad, and then there's the children, there's a pecking order. So was it blindless follow what I tell you to follow, or was there a discussion? How did you raise your kids essentially?
So this is interesting, and I always get a kick out of this. So when my kids were, like, people sometimes ask, "Do you spank?" Right? And in some cases they're like, "Well, of course." And in other cases, like, "Oh my gosh, you're a brute." And somebody was asking me about my philosophy on that once. I said, "Well, look, when my kids were really little, and I mean like 3 and under, 4 and under, when I couldn't always explain complex principles to them, if they were trying to touch a hot stove or go run and play in the street, I might give them a little swat." Nothing hard, but enough for them to associate running into the street with pain, because they're not in a position to understand the physics involved of you versus car equals, bloody spot on the road. Right. Yeah, exactly. But they could understand, okay, don't go out there because it hurts and I'll get in trouble. As they got older, I was very big on the idea of making sure that my kids understood why I was telling them to do what they needed to do. And there's a couple reasons for this. If you are teaching your kids the way I think you should, and that's the idea that there is such a thing as objective truth, there is such a thing as right and wrong. Some answers are better than others for various situations. Then they have to know that you actually believe that, but they have to understand it. Because if they don't understand logically why they shouldn't do some things or should do other things or whatever it is, then ultimately you're not actually teaching them to apply critical thinking and rest upon a good moral foundation. What you're actually doing is you're teaching them to obey authority. So if the only reason why your kids do what you're telling them to do is because they're afraid of punishment or they want reward, then again, you haven't taught them critical thinking. You've taught them to respect a particular power structure. And when you're no longer at the top of that power structure and it's somebody else, whether it be a boss or a professor or a captain or whatever it is, they're going to find themselves in a situation where they don't always have good answers for why they should do something or should not do something, because it's just obey so I don't get punished and I do get rewarded. And that creates a very, very weak society. I want my sons and daughters to be willing to stand up for what they believe, but they can't effectively do that unless I've equipped them emotionally, spiritually, intellectually to be able to do that. So I was very big on this idea that as they start to, as their cognitive ability develops, foster that, allow them to ask questions and engage in that dialogue. Now, there were still times where, I've got 3 kids and we're at Disneyland and it's busy and we're trying to get out. And it's just like, get in a line and follow me, right? We're not going to debate this. Just do it. But when I did have the time to explain to them why they should or should not do something, I took that time. And here's one of the most important things that I can say on this. Inevitably, there will come a point where you have taught your child something and they're going to approach you, and it'll probably happen in their teens. And they're going to approach you with something you did wrong. And they're going to be right. They're going to be right. And in that moment, every single ounce of you wants to be like, dude, I remember when I had to clean up your crap. Right now, you're coming here and you're lecturing me on something that I had to do in a split second, or a decision, or I was busy, or I was upset. The only thing I would say is that if your kid ever comes to you and they do it respectfully, there's a big difference between disrespectfully or respectfully. But if my child comes to me respectfully, and my oldest daughter did this when she was about 13, she goes, Daddy, I don't like the way, she goes, Daddy, can I talk to you? So she asked for my attention. Yes, sweetheart, go ahead. She goes, I don't think you handled the situation downstairs very well. And I got mad at her brother and sister. The kitchen was a mess. I was upset about it. And she goes, Daddy, they were actually making you something and they had permission to do it. And you didn't find out what they were doing or why they were doing it before you got upset. And they're kind of like too embarrassed or ashamed to talk to you about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, gosh, dang. And what you got to remember is, in that moment, if you're not willing to tell your child when they've got it right, when they have applied the lessons you have taught them correctly, but now it's directed at you, if you're not willing to look back and be like, you know what, sweetheart, you're right. I'm wrong. I'll go down. I'll talk to Allie and Luke. I'll apologize. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. If you're not willing to do that in that moment, what you've taught them is you didn't really believe it. You taught them this was a convenient thing to be used for controlling them, not an objective standard, which is supposed to be anybody can apply to. And so I really think that, and like, there by the grace of God go I, right? I'm not claiming that I've always taken that response. I've definitely screwed up at times, a lot of times. But that was one where I'm very thankful in that moment, because we both remember it. She remembered in that moment she could bring something to my attention. And as long as she could do it respectfully, and she had a good argument, and she could present her evidence and facts, that Daddy would admit he was wrong. And what that meant was, as she was getting older, and now you're going through stages of dating and all these other things where you want to be someone that your kids can come to, man, that starts early with laying that foundation. And again, when you're wrong, being able to admit it.
So you mentioned when you took us on this journey, which, by the way, this has like been super powerful. Yeah, amazing so far. You mentioned that you'd say where you were at your point in the journey with becoming a dad. So personally, where were you?
So Allison says, the biggest commitment a man will ever make in his life is having a baby. It's a bigger commitment than marriage, because a marriage can end. Being a father can never end. Once you start, it's there for life, period, regardless of what happens. And I went, ooh, that's a big one. And she said, most men, there's a feeling of being ready. And ready for most men equates to either, if they had a good childhood, they're able to replicate or better what was provided or given to them as a kid. If they have a bad childhood, it's based on they can provide the childhood they wish they would have had growing up. But either way, that's when a man qualifies, the box checks, and goes, I'm ready to be a father. I can provide the same or better, or I can provide the thing I wish I had that I didn't. And so when I looked at that, I got to a place where I was ready. I was still nervous, but I was like, I think I'm ready. I can provide. I had a great childhood, and I think I can provide what I was provided with. And I wasn't anywhere close to where my dad was at that stage of his life, but I knew the most important factors, and I could provide that. And I was ready. So looking back, the stage of life I was in, when my wife and I got married, we were both 28. 28 years old when we met each other. We got married, I think, at 29. And I was ending knighthood. I was ending the proving to myself what was possible and conquering all the things around the world. So the first trip her and I went together was, I think, 15-day, 10-country cruise through Central and South America. That was next up on her trip. I was taking, 25-day, 10-country cruise. I was taking a group of like 20 people with me on a trip that I was leading through Central and South America. And then I text my wife and I was like, hey, do you want to be my cabin mate? And she just melted. She was like, oh my God, he invited me to share a cabin. Like, oh, her heart melted. We're going to 25 days, 10 countries in Central and South America. That was next on my trip list anyways. Like, she was so excited. And so that's when we met. We finished doing a lot of night stuff. So a lot of traveling the world together and doing trips everywhere and seeing and conquering the world. We got a private jet membership one year. And we just cleared our schedule and organized it that every jet that was open, we would get on. And so we spent a year, every plane that popped up, we got on it and just went somewhere. Didn't know where we were going, what was there, how it worked. We just got on every plane that took off. And so we had fun. And then there was a transition where we looked at the life we wanted to live and how we wanted to live. And when we said, if we want to do that financially, it's going to require an insane amount of work that we're going to have to really put in. And that's when I started to transition into the print stage, that work, breathe. I already knew the work I wanted to do, which was helping people live better lives, helping people have better relationships, better businesses, and better mentally, emotionally, physically as humans. And that was the work I wanted to do. And so we just went to town. We spent 4 years in Tampa just busting our faces and working nonstop every day of the week. We learned two things. One, it's hard to work together as a young couple because you're trying to have a relationship and own a business together and be sexy and fun, yet be responsible and accountable for results. Like, that's very challenging. We had a lot of tears at the table where I was wildly direct and it would hurt her feelings and she'd be crying and she'd be mad. And I'd be like, man, I don't know how to say it in a fluffier way. Like, if the target's missed, it's fucking missed. Get it done. Like, and that was not the way to speak to your wife, I learned.
You and me both.
Yeah. So we learned I needed to learn how to communicate, not just drive ideas home, but say it in more effective and loving and caring ways and kind ways. And she's tough as nails. She ran a $4.3 million a month ad budget for McAfee when she was in digital advertisement at a big agency. So she's tough as nails and kicks ass, and she can build businesses left and right. I'm just, in my personal life, super, super friendly. But if you take me in the business, I'm direct and harder. And so I forgot when I switched hats to tell her I switched hats, and she just thought I was like coming after her. And so we figured out how. We used the DISC assessment to learn how to better communicate with each other in business. And once we ironed that out, we started working really well together. And we just got a great rhythm. Our business took off. We had a lot of fun doing that. We also learned we didn't like living in standard places where people work normal jobs. And I was like, that is not our tribe. That's not our group of people that we fit well with. We love them. They're great humans, but that is not our way of life. And so we moved to Costa Rica. We moved back to San Diego. We moved to Miami Beach. We eventually moved to Puerto Rico in this little beach town here. And we're like, yeah, we found out that the types of people we connect with the most are very entrepreneurial, tend to be nomadic, tend to live in very specific type of vacation or beach cities around the world. And we just gel really well with those types of people. And that was a huge shift for us. And so when we were in Miami Beach and we started to purposefully try to have a baby, we did it on purpose. We said, okay, we've done all our fun conquering the world. We've built our business. We've dialed ourselves in. We've done everything we want to do as a young couple without a child. Let's have one. Let's have one. And one of my friends actually said this the other day. He said, a couple that works really well together, just the two of them, is a different couple when you add a child. And he said, he has 4 kids now. So he said they become even more of a different couple when you add a second child, even more different as a third, even more different as a fourth. And he said something that was kind of a zap, which is not every couple that works well together as a couple works well together as a couple with kids.
When you were kind of in that moment, you found out that you had a baby. Obviously, you've been kind of ish planning it, or at least your wife was at the time. And you're planning this, and now the moment happens. I'm going to be a dad. I'm going to be a new dad. What goes through your mind in relation to what do I now need to do? Who do I now need to become to be the dad that's a provider that's doing all these amazing things for my soon-to-be child?
Well, you nailed that, because the biggest thing that I wanted to figure out was how did I want to build my life so that I could spend as much time as possible with this thing that I have unconditional love for, that I couldn't even imagine having that type of love for beforehand. How could I spend as much time as possible and create a life for them that is absolutely amazing, and a life for my family that's absolutely amazing? So what I wanted to do was figure out all of those things. And I think we're finding a balance now. And the biggest balance of that is financial independence. And financial independence is kind of the biggest thing that I talk about, is figuring out how to get your dollars working for you so that you don't have to work anymore and you can spend your time doing what you want to do. And becoming a provider was one of the biggest things. And I know a lot of people have a lot of light bulb moments. I know a lot of people who do the biggest things in their life the year that their first kid is born. And that was no different for me. It was something where we were starting all different types of things, including, side businesses and things like that were actually kind of scaling. So it was one of those things where that was kind of the impetus of a lot of things that we're doing now. And I thought I have less time, but at the same time, I'm utilizing that time so well to grow so many different things at the same time that it's very cool to see how it happens and how that actually motivates you to do that.
Yeah, it's so true. Like the light bulb thing for sure, and then the time management thing. So I would say that I went through a similar process. So I built and sold a dating app, and I sold it just before we had our first baby, just because I wanted to free. I don't want to be caught into this high growth tech startup situation and then miss the first 4 years of potentially my only child. And so I exited at the next raise at that point in time, and then sort of went through a stage from there. But one thing in my next ventures and what I do now is I found, okay, I have to be so efficient with my time, because if I'm not using whatever block that is that I have to get, whether it's fitness or business related, that's going to, I'm not going to be there mentally, probably more so than anything, because I'm going to be thinking about all the stuff that I still needed to get done. So how do you structure your life now from a day-to-day? Walk us through how you structure your life with these different projects that you have going on, with building this channel, and then still maintaining the balance is a term that I use loosely, but still maintaining that balance to be able to get, be a success at everything in life.
So the biggest thing I do is when I wake up, the first thing I do is I spend some time with my kids, because my kids, my oldest actually wakes up first. He wakes up pretty early, 5:36, somewhere around that range. So I wake up, I spend some time with my kids, about an hour. Then the next thing I do is I time block everything, just like you're saying. I do the same exact thing. So everything is scheduled throughout my day, and I do that the night before. The tool that I use, if you want to go that deep, is I use Asana, and then I use my Google Calendar as well. So those two things are the major things that I utilize. And then the first thing I do is I always work out. So I built a home gym, and I spent the money, invested the money in a home gym, so I didn't have to drive to the gym and then come back. It was worth every single penny. I use that thing every single day. So that's the very first thing that I do. Then from there, what I do is we kind of get the kids ready. They go to school or daycare or whatever, and then we go to the next point. So then I start working, and usually I start working from 8 o'clock in the morning at the office all the way up to about 4 o'clock. And then from there, drive home. And then the time that I come home after that, the normal part of the day, is the time that I want to spend total focus time with my family. So what we do, we always have dinner together. We spend time all the way up until they go to bed. So they usually go to bed around 7:38. And then during that time frame, once they go to bed, I utilize that time after the next couple of hours to get the rest of my projects done, because I'm working on so many things at the same time right now. The biggest thing is making sure that I utilize that time as wisely as possible. So it's all time blocked. I batch all the stuff that I do. So for example, if I'm making TikToks, for example, I batch all the TikToks for the week into one session so that it's all efficient and I can utilize it in that way. And then on the weekends, what I do is I try not to work as much as I possibly can on the weekends, but a lot of times I have to. So I wait till nap time. They still nap right now. Wait till nap time, work a couple of hours during that time, and just try to get it in on the weekends as well. But utilizing that time as efficiently as possible is one of the biggest things to be able to accomplish it. And that's kind of what my generic day would look like and how I would structure it out.
For sure. Does your wife work?
She does. So my wife is an executive of a big company here as well. So she is extremely busy as well. So that family time that we have, you know, in the morning and at nighttime is incredibly important to us, because that's why both kids do go to one. We have a nanny come for the youngest until he turns 2, and then the oldest goes to daycare, but it's like a VPK here, which is like preschool essentially. So they have a curriculum and everything like that.
What did you find going through the teachings? And obviously once 8 months, so probably a little bit early on that stage. But with the other two especially, the different approaches to your teaching, and obviously one of them would have been the second time around, and I'm sure there was a little bit more know-how there, but how did you find that process applying some of the things that you teach now to those boys as they were growing up?
Yeah. So the truth is most kids are not, obviously no kids are cookie cutter, right? But, you know, 3/4 of kids, or maybe 80% of kids, are kind of within this normal emotional realm of, you know, every kid has tantrums, every kid melts down, but even beyond what you talked about, neurodiversity and autism and disorders or differences, neurological differences, you also have a subcategory that's becoming more and more popular. There's a documentary out on Netflix or on Amazon Prime about it, called high sensitivity. And so this top 20%, or not top, but there's 20% of the population for whom everything can be emotional. Everything can be a meltdown. And there's this brilliant psychologist, Elaine Aron, who has written extensively about this. I only learned about this recently, but my oldest is one of these. So my oldest is is just, when everybody else was having an easy time, every single thing for us was a challenge. So for people ask me all the time, like, I just don't feel like I have to use all these techniques all the time to get my kid through a tantrum, and they're just kind of get over it. I'm like, yeah, well, you don't have a highly sensitive kid. So coming from that and learning and building these skills with him, like, this was not an easy transition. This was a challenge, and still is. He's 6. We have to do, like, birthday parties have to be different. We can't open presents at the birthday party because, like, that's just something he's just, like, super stressed about. Like, what if I open it and my face doesn't do the right thing and then people hate me? Like, at 5 years old, right? Like,
Yeah, wow.
He understands subtle nuances between people. So understanding that, now with my second one, who's not nearly that sensitive and much kind of more mainstream in that way, I feel like I'm just like a rock star most of the time because like I'm pulling out these things and I'm like, oh man, I got like set myself up for all these things. And I can do all this smarter, not harder, not just authoritative, but, you know, co-regulation and connecting and redirecting and all of these things that I talk about. And I can do that stuff with this 2-year-old. And it's just like, he's just like, oh, this is great, you know, and I can just respond. So that's been the change for me, is that I started really tough. A lot of people will have a highly sensitive kid second or third. And that's so hard because it was like not that hard for like the first one or the first two. And then they have a kid and they're just like, nothing works. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that is how it feels. They just have a whole different set of emotional needs. So that was the process for me, but also just not having as many hands is just hard. I don't know that I could have done my highly sensitive child as my third one and been successful in the same ways because I just didn't have the hands. I mean, it's just hard.
It's different, right? Because you've got to balance the rest, you know, the other children as well and all those types of things. So I'm curious about that. I just want to touch on that really quickly, because obviously having a highly sensitive child, you know, or a more sensitive child, you know, and them understanding the nuances of, you know, emotional expression and how people feel about them and the opinions that people have about them and obviously all those types of things, that can obviously make you very self-conscious. But obviously it can also, if you move into that, if you ease into that, right, and use that as a strength, it must give you a lot of ability to use that as something that you can take into the real world. It's like, I understand people better than most. I understand emotions better than most, right?
Right. So this is right. So if you look at, you know, you'd have to read her book, The Highly Sensitive Person, which isn't about parenting. It's about adults who have high sensitivity. But if you look at some of the great kind of emotional poets, artists, Elena Morissette is the one in the documentary, but if you look at some of these and business leaders too, like big time, especially big time salespeople who really understand how to sell. Like these people are all high sensitivity people. Like presidents, so a huge percentage of them, United States presidents, are high sensitivity people because they can look at somebody, they can adjust on the fly how they're communicating to just really fine tune that in and get it. But at the same time, you're right. Like it's also just the flood of it. So another way to describe it is just high perceptivity. So like just imagine that you're just taking in 30% more information in your environment at all times. So anything that's loud is 30% louder. Anything that smells bad is 30% more bad smelling. Anything that's itchy is 30% more itchy, right? But also any tiny little nuanced detail is 30% bigger and you can see it when other people can't. So it's a huge, amazing superhero level power if it doesn't completely destroy you and leave you in a puddle of just kind of a glass case of emotions, which is a Chicago reference.
Who is the true leader of a family?
The true leader of a family is not the mother or the father, and it's not the kids. The active leaders are the parents. They're the active leaders, but they're not the true leader. The true leader of a family is actually the presence of God. And I'll tell you why. I'm not talking religion, I'm talking logic. Now, so if you look at that, the true leader of a family is the presence of God. How is the presence of God the true leader? Here's why. What is leadership? Leadership is influence. That's what leadership is. Leadership is having the ability to influence somebody else to join your cause, to do what you're trying to get them to do, right? So that's leadership. So now imagine in a family, the parents say, we're atheists, we don't believe in God, it's just us, just the mother and father and the kids. Okay, that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you just got to understand what you've just done is you've made the highest role model for those kids as the parents. That's it. There's no other higher than the mother and the father now. The problem is that the mother and father are not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And because they put themselves in the position as being the highest possible role models for their kids, every time they make a mistake, now the kids are watching them thinking, what? Every mistake, week after week, month after month, year after year, causes little bits of respect that is lost in the eyes of the kids. And it gets to the point where all of a sudden they're looking at as their parents as, these are not good role models. You know, they're not what they're saying they are. And what ends up happening is the kids don't stop listening to them because maybe they're fighting, they're arguing with this, that, the other. There's no other role models and it disintegrates. Now, let's just say now you bring the presence of God into the family. Now, what I mean by the presence of God, I'm not talking religion. I'm talking if now somebody in that family starts just praying and saying, God, you know what? I'm angry at my dad. You know, he got mad at me. What can I do? If you know the heart of God and you pray, all of a sudden what's going to happen is the more you pray, you're going to start hearing voices in your head that say this. Hey, you know what? Forgive your dad. He didn't really mean it. He loves you. It just came out of his mouth. Now, where'd that come from? I don't know. But if you start praying, you're going to hear that. You're going to feel it in your heart. So what happens is when you bring in the presence of God in the family and different members of the family are just praying on their own in their own room, what it does is now the presence of God by them praying is the leader because it's influencing the way they behave towards their dad, towards their mother, towards their brother, towards their sister. So the presence of God now is leading, influencing each person in that family to behave in a certain way towards the rest of the members of the family. And guess what? It keeps the family together like the glue because everybody now is forgiving each other, but they don't know why. Why are they forgiving each other? Because they got this little voice that's in their heart saying, your dad's really a good guy. It's okay. Forgive him. That's the true leader. And that's got nothing to do with religion. It's just having a relationship and knowing the heart of God, just telling you, it's okay, forgive him. When that happens, That is the secret to having a family that's close and forgives each other. Now you take that presence out, you've just removed the glue. And I said that to my son, because my son said to me, oh, I don't think I need God. And I said to my son, I said, of course you don't need God. What do you need God for? If you want money, you ask me. You want food, you ask me. If you want a house, you ask me. I said, what do you need God for? And then I turned around and I said to him, but remember this, one day I'm not going to be here, and nor is your mom. And then something might happen in your life that brings you to your knees. Everything could collapse. And you know what's going to happen? On that day, you're going to get on your knees and you're going to pray and you're going to hope that there is a God, because your life's a mess. And you're going to pray and say, God, I haven't believed in you all these years, but you know what? Can you help me? I said, on that day, two things are going to happen. You're going to pray, but the second thing, you're going to have an enormous amount of guilt in your heart because you never cared about ever trying to build that relationship. I says, what's better, waiting till that day or slowly trying to build that relationship now? So maybe he can help you to avoid some of those challenges that might come into your life. I said, that's why you do this. That's how you keep a family together.
That's it from us on this episode on the DadBub Show. If you want to find out a little bit more about us, head on over to www.dadbub.com. Until next time, see you next week.